Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend Alfonzo Rachel. This is the Virtue Signal, where we try to make some sense out of the politics of the day. And sometimes things we look at aren't so cool, and sometimes they're wonderful, and other times there's a way to turn things that appear to be awful into things that are maybe not quite so awful. And that's where we're going today. I've been thinking about this idea of fire, wildfires, fires out in nature. There's nothing more horrifying than watching one of those things. I've seen the fires in California, but when I was much younger in Florida, there was a fire in the Everglades, and I got within a couple hundred yards of that. And you can't look at a big fire because just because the heat is too strong on your face. Watching things burn, watching houses burn, is horrifying and fascinating because you realize that something irreplaceable is being destroyed. And you're right about that. But in a search for perspective to help us in these extremely challenging times, I came to the realization that as far as nature is concerned, fire is what's necessary to create new life that put aside all of the messing around that humans have done, that the purpose in nature untouched of wildfires is to burn away all of this dead stuff so that new life can rise. And this, of course, is the idea behind the Firebird myth, the phoenix, the idea that something new that rises in the ashes of its destruction. And for those of us looking out into the cultural landscape and seeing things burning, I thought I might talk with you for a little while about this idea that you can watch something burn and be horrified, and even worse than watching something burn is coming to the place the next day and seeing everything just blackened and gone. That's an emotionally devastating feeling, and many of us are feeling that right now. But when you come back to this place next year, what you find is you find some green shoots there. And if you come back in 2 or 3 years, you find a completely green rebirth when the stuff that burned in the first place burned because it was dried out and dead. Am I reaching too far here, or do you think maybe there's some truth in that?
Oh, definitely, man. Man, whenever there's especially around here, we get those summer fires, and but when I smell that fire, man, it smells great. I love the smell. And
no, it does.
And it messes with my appreciation of it though, man, because we like, man, something's burning, man, and it smells like really good. And I'm like,
yeah, it might be somebody's
house. You know,
somebody's life,
somebody's dreams. And I'm like, oh, and my heart goes out to that, man. But I know I hear what you're saying. It's especially like when I think about my stuff, man, I got some really nice gear, and I'm like, man, it's sometimes that feeling just hits you, like, when you might be off at a distance and you see that black smoke coming up and it might be coming from your area. It's like, oh, no, not my stuff.
Oh my God.
And
sometimes it is.
But the operative word here, I think that you dropped in there is restore, right? And when we're looking at, if I can assume that you're kind of applying this analogy, if you will, even though it's a real dynamic, to, like, say, for instance, what's going on with our country,
100%. I'm using it as an analogy for that. Yes.
It looks like, our country's got, maybe at some point that misery index will kick in the way they did with Carter, and people be like, hey, okay, enough of this. All right. 4 years, you're done. Okay. We want somebody.
I'm convinced that's happening before our eyes. But right now we're still looking at burning, or we're waking up the next day and looking at everything being blackened and charred.
Yes. The Lord is referred to as an all-consuming fire, right? Sometimes fire is necessary to purify things. Sometimes it's like God's like, look, man, I tried to be nice about this, man. I did it with water the first time. Okay, I tried to clean this whole thing with the bath of my wrath, and I flooded the whole world. You knuckleheads still didn't get it. Came back, still did the same thing. All right, next time I have to do this fire. I'm gonna have to do this hard way. I'm gonna have to bring some fire. I'm coming after y'all with a flamethrower. All right. So it's one of those things where we see that even fire may be something that's necessary. We see that God has made these judgments by fires in doing certain things. The altar of the tabernacle that's pointing to Yeshua, who is going to be the one who is going to bring this kind of judgment. This altar that is made that has to be kept lit to provide these atonements over and over again for what people are doing, to renew us of what has been done. These things that we just keep doing over and over again, when the message is right there, these preventative measures that, hey, you don't want this to happen, you do this. All right. It's even a doctor will tell you, hey, sometimes the best prescription for thing is preventative measures. Don't do that so you don't have to take the medicine. All right. So you don't have to deal with this inflammation burning your body down, And that's what we're kind of in a state of right now. Bill, the nation is in a state of inflammation.
The world's on fire.
Right.
Yeah.
We got a serious fever going on, man. And this fever ain't coming from COVID, And so what are the things that we could do to prevent these things from happening? But as it is, like you said, we're looking at this big wall of fire, and you ain't enough garden hoses available to go ahead and take this thing on. But to extinguish it per se, there are things that we're going to have to examine about ourselves, not change our principles, but to change the way that we approach it. We don't want to be flammable aspects of it. We don't want to add, to the flames of it. And so there's certain things that we have to assume that we can do. And what am I trying to say here? Assume that we can do and inspire other people, to do the same thing, not change our principles, change the approach.
Yes. And this is where I'm going with this, because in times that are as infuriating and depressing and shocking as the ones we live in now. What I'm trying to do here with this episode is I'm trying to provide not perspective on what's going on in the fire, because everything's burning and there's nothing nice about that. I'm trying to provide some sort of time perspective. For example, I could walk you to a really beautiful piece of shoreline in Alaska, pristine and gorgeous. And you could look around and say, wow, isn't nature wonderful when we leave it alone? Well, that particular piece of shoreline would be exactly where the Exxon Valdez spilled all its oil back in the 80s, I want to say. And if you had been standing there on this exact same spot 2 or 3 days after that, there would be nothing but dead birds and dead fish and black sludge and to the horizon. And you would be filled with despair. It's only after time has passed that you realize the power of recovery, the power of regeneration, despite the fact that that it's a horrendous thing to deal with. Oil does in fact break down. It's a hydrocarbon. It's a carbohydrate. It's hydrocarbon, carbohydrate, back and forth. It breaks down, and that part I think it was Prince William Sound, I want to say, up in Alaska, is now pretty much pristine. And certainly in another 100 years it will be. And in the several billion years remaining to the Earth, there will be no trace of what was once so catastrophically awful. I'm not trying to mitigate or say that the things that are choking under this black sludge or burning in front of our eyes, I'm not trying to say that there's nothing to worry about. Hey, be cheerful about it. I'm not trying to say that at all. It's horrific and painful and depressing and frightening. But what I am trying to say is, when we stand in the middle of a burned out forest, or we stand on a shore of a beach that's been covered with 3 or 4 inches of crude oil, we, in our minds, assume that this is how it is now going to be forever. That this thing that we used to love, where we had a house or something that we cherished, is now burned to the ground. And in that particular moment in time, we look at all its destruction, and as humans, we say, it's gone and nothing will replace it. This is now what used to be a garden is now cinders. And we feel that loss. But what we don't do is we don't do what I'm trying to do here, which is to say that all of this is true, absolutely painfully, horribly true, but that it is possible, in fact, not only possible, it's pretty much certain, that even if you leave it alone, forget about trying to heal it, even if you leave it alone, the damage will eventually be replaced by new growth, by new things, new living things. And when you get right down to it in terms of wildfire, not only is this kind of thing survivable, it's necessary. And I've had that feeling quite a lot lately. The show I did this week on Moving Back to America is called The Second Fleet. And the short form of it is that the fleet that was sunk at Pearl Harbor could not have defeated the Japanese because it was obsolete. If the fleet at Pearl Harbor hadn't been attacked and sunk on Pearl Harbor and just sailed out to meet the Japanese fleet, it would have been sunk in no time. We had to lose that first fleet, and the shock and horror of it caused us to create the fleet that eventually beat the Japanese quite soundly. The ships that we recovered from Pearl Harbor and put back into use later in the war couldn't keep up with the ships that we built as a result of the catastrophe. And I feel that very strongly now. I feel like that they're not going to succeed. I feel like they're not going to succeed, and they know they're not going to succeed. I feel like, yes, we're going to win this thing, but casualties are going to get worse before they get better. Feel all of that. But I am struck by the fact that so much of despair and confusion and depression, disappointment, wonder, anxiety are based on where you stand in time. Prior to December 7th, Pearl Harbor was a beautiful place. On the day of December 7th, and for many years after that, it was a tomb, it was a graveyard, it was an oil spill, it was a nightmare. And now it's a beautiful place again. So keep in mind the nature of time to heal not only all wounds, but the possibility, and this is the thing I really do believe, the possibility that whatever it was that you lost to fire or whatever the case may be, can in fact be replaced, and can be replaced, as certainly in the case of Pearl Harbor and that first fleet, can be replaced by something that is much, much better if we simply decide that that's what we're going to do.
That's right, man. It's the thrust of the heartache is when these things burn down, and a lot of times, these things may burn down for just no good reason. Even if you can explain it, it still doesn't take away from the sting of it.
Lightning strike or whatever. Yeah. Boom.
And you know what? Like we, watching places, businesses close up. And on a sentimental level, places that my wife and I, where we first met, or had our first date or had our first cup of coffee together or something like that, man. Like, so many years ago, gone. It ain't there no more. For no, and chains that have been successful in places, the franchise that have been successful. So it's like, this place closed? Really?
Yep.
So things like that, and just seeing these other places that, we've hung out at, they're gone now. And the heart of it is that it's for no good reason. But this no good reason was somehow sold so effectively. Good marketing or good propaganda caused places to close up for no good reason. And that's a heartache in itself. And we have to, hope that, hey, are people going to be able to dial in and recognize truth and wake up and really be woke? Not this kind of woke that they're talking about, these woke zombies, but like really wake up and say like, oh man, as we talk about, the emperor really ain't got no clothes on, and look at this and say, man, this ain't what it is, and really get sick of that. Out of this fire, will we actually, because, there ain't no, as far as I know, there ain't no light without heat. But at some point, can we actually get some light more than heat? Because a lot of people raising a lot of heat. We're not shedding a lot of light, though. That's a weird thing in nature. You can't really do that. And I'm not talking about the kind of light that's just so intense that it blinds people. I'm talking about a lamp at people's feet so they can see where they're going and see what's going on, and see what time it is. So I'm hoping that light will go on with folks. And, I like to think that's what we're trying to do, is try to help provide that lamp and the light of truth to, provide it for people's feet so they can see where they're going. And because there's a lot of heat out there, man. And it is a light that is burning things down. And after which, we're hoping that, I hope the whole thing don't have to, I hope just only enough of it burns down where people are like, okay. We're going to have to start cutting down some old growth, this old nonsense that's been going on.
Right. That's exactly
that
right.
stuff's got to be removed. Right? And put the fire
That's
break.
the point I was trying to make.
Yes.
With the Pearl Harbor example, it's like the fleet that we were depending on to defend the country could not have defended the country, and it was sunk. And the fleet that we built as a result of that is so much more powerful that it's simply, it's incomparable. You couldn't they could not sail together because the old ships that we had so much confidence in, that were the pride of our Pacific fleet, were just plain obsolete. We couldn't build the fleet of battleships. We couldn't build the Iowa-class battleships and the Essex-class aircraft carriers, for those of you who are into those kind of things, if we hadn't lost the old World War I style super dreadnoughts like Arizona and Yorktown. We would have simply depended on these things, and they were not up to the task. It's not fun to watch Pearl Harbor. It's not fun to watch any of this. I really like your example about restaurants, because we have emotional attachments to places and things and all the rest of it. And when we see a restaurant close, for me, it's always sad. And when we see a restaurant we particularly like, it's especially sad. I was a big fan of Boston Market. I just loved the food there. Boston Market's gone. They replaced it with something called Sweet Green, which is, Sweet Green, isn't that California? Actually, foods are pretty good. But the point is that the new restaurant can't open until the old restaurant closes. And even the place that you love so much, more often than not, probably was only there because of the restaurant before it had failed. I'm just trying to provide a sense of larger perspective to take some of the sting out of the time that we live in now, because this is an extraordinarily stressful time in this ongoing war that I'm convinced we're going to win. And to understand that when wildfire burns through things, it's horrible to watch. It's horrible the day after. But 4 years after, it's really surprising. And 10 years after, it's shockingly beautiful.
Indeed, man. And you mentioned you dropped in the word dreadnought. You said these dreadnoughts. That's an interesting thing, man, because when you say dreadnought, it means fear nothing, right? And
what it means.
So it's like, and that's where we gotta be, Bill. I'm not saying that, we're all supposed to be about, we fear nothing, but really, you either respond to faith or you respond to fear, right? And that's a lot of what's happening to the country right now. Fear is being sold on folks. And this is like one of the things that the Lord is always saying, hey, don't be afraid. Don't be fearing stuff, right? Kazak, he shows me, says Kazak, which means take courage. And when you have that courage that's based in him, you have this response that is practical. Because when people are afraid of stuff, man, they often don't respond practically. Their response ends up with stuff like this: having to wear a mask, or getting injected with stuff that they don't really know what it is. But they're more afraid of what they've been sold than they're afraid of the people coming in. The ones who promoted the fear in the first place are now going to say, oh, but take this, it'll make you feel better. These responses to fear, and this will contribute to the flames. And we would like to think that between us and our audience, we got perspective on that. And it's territory that we would like to grow. Not trying to grow our brand for the sake of making a name for ourselves. The word of God himself says, I expect you to increase your territory. I want you to go in there. I want you to take Canaan. All right. So that's what we're trying to do. That's the objective. Not, like I said, not trying to, build a brand for ourselves, man. We're trying to do what we can to promote the principle of Kazak. Take courage. Don't let fear be your God, and, respond to the faith.
Well, if you Franklin Roosevelt talking about Pearl Harbor, I think I actually don't remember if this was in the wake of Pearl Harbor or whether this was a depression. I suspect it was after World War II started for us. But he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That's precisely right. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. But ultimately, it's like, if you don't surrender, you will win. Period. And so the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. Now, if Roosevelt's a little bit too pinko for you, you could go with the stuff that Frank Herbert wrote in Dune, which is a great movie, by the way. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death. It is the ability to instill fear in people is the most powerful weapon that evil people have. And they are, I was going to say their guns are blazing, but to be perfectly honest with you folks, I just caught myself. Their guns were blazing, not blazing so much anymore. everybody can feel the tide is turning. Everybody can feel the defenses are starting to stiffen. Everybody can feel that we've had enough of this nonsense. And as they begin to realize that their single sneak attack great offensive has failed, then all of a sudden the morale tables will shift, the moment will turn, the board will tip, and then we will, in our righteous fury, come back and win this war. And I haven't got the slightest doubt about that at all. I have moments. I had a moment last week, but all of the big picture tells me that even in the middle of a wildfire, the creation for something newer and better is being made, despite the horror of having to watch it at that moment. That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, many of whom joined us a year ago and who have given us so much inspiration. Me personally, as I mentioned on the last show we did this week, the response to the show we did called Trapped, where not only you helped me out, but my friend Zoe gave me so much fortification when I needed it. We're very grateful to all of you, constantly grateful to all of you. And we're very, very glad you're here. So for Alfonzo Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next week here on the Virtue Signal.